everybody. My name is Traven Rice, and I am the host of the Lowdown Culture Cast. I'm the arts and culture editor and co-founder of the Lowdown. And we are here at P&T Knitwear in their podcast studio on Eldridge Street, the Community Podcast Center. And very excited to be talking to all different culture changers in downtown New York. And today we are talking with Fury Young, who released his first solo EP as a musician called Tree Indeed this past July. His music is artland rock meets surrealist rap, a melodic record about growing up in the LES and life. So this album is a culmination of hard-earned life experiences, poetic soul, surrealist rap, and artland rock and roll. And Fury grew up in the neighborhood right down here, very close by, in the 1990s. So this EP channels all that gritty, diverse sound of the era into the music. And for over a decade, he's worked in music championing voices of other artists with Freer Records, the first nonprofit record label in the United States for musicians in prison, as well as those formerly incarcerated. And I know you also write poetry. Mm-hmm. And we were familiar with some of your other family members because the Lowdown's been around. And so your father, Lee, was an artist in the neighborhood. And I think he had a big history with the place that you guys are living, right? Sort of like enabling that building to be.
Yeah, he found it. He found the building.
Yeah. And then turned it into is it a co-op or is it
It's a co-op, yes.
Yeah.
So they got 3 units in it in the early 80s for like $20,000.
Yeah. Of the building.
Yeah.
On Eldridge Street.
Yeah.
When things were
other artists.
When things were kind of very derelict around here, right?
Very derelict, yeah. It was completely abandoned. They had to totally gut reno it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and turn it into a solid kind of community place that people could live. Mm-hmm. And that's where you grew up.
That's where I grew up, yeah.
What was that like?
People ask me that a lot. It's a hard question to answer because it's all you know. But I think it was a pretty good childhood. It was certainly interesting. I mean, it's funny, Traven, because it sort of feels like a full circle feeling now. Like I live in the same building now, not the same apartment, but when I was younger, it was still gritty. It was still lots of, drug addicts, and I would step on hypodermic needles as a kid, My mom's friend has a story where when I was like 3, I pointed to someone on the street and I said, "Look, mommy, it's a prostitute." Now it kind of feels like that. Again, I mean, I don't really see like night walking sex workers, but I definitely see a lot of strung out people. It's sad to say. Even though the neighborhood is super gentrified, mm-hmm. It feels a little bit like when I was a kid.
You mean sort of in the last few years?
COVID, yeah.
Since COVID?
Since COVID, yeah.
You noticed
because I'm right by Delancey,
mm-hmm.
and Delancey is just next level. Like by the Essex, the McDonald's there. It's like an open air drug market.
Totally.
Other day I walk by, I see the McDonald's security guard hanging out with them. I was like, oh, so this is how it all goes down. It's an inside job.
Oh, yeah. There's always a lot. There's always like cops and stuff there. There's always sort of not always, but a lot around there, mm-hmm. and incidents. Yeah, it has felt like it's getting rougher, I would say.
Yeah.
Again,
it's sad. A lot of folks who are, mentally ill and have addiction.
So you went away for a while. I mean, traveling, and then came back how long ago?
Well, I lived in LA for a little bit in my early 20s, and then I lived in Bushwick for 8 years. Mm-hmm. And then when Freer Records, the label you mentioned, was turning into a label, it started as one album. I moved back home for a while and was just volunteering. Mm-hmm. So it took a while to get a salary.
So how did that come about? How did you get interested in working with incarcerated and formerly incarcerated musicians?
Yeah. So actually, it's kind of a neighborhood story. I knew a guy growing up. I met him when I was 10, named Alexander Pridgeon, and he'd done some time, not a lot, but a formative period, I think, way upstate, like by Canada. And he was a neighborhood raconteur, a black guy who was originally from Harlem, and we just became really close. He was at what used to be Rivington House, which was a place for people who were HIV positive, and he was a resident there.
And so you just met him in the neighborhood when you were growing up?
Yeah. It started out, I didn't like him for many years because he was really annoying. And when I was young, he would yell stuff, listen to your mother, that kind of thing. He just was a shit talker, as they say.
Okay.
And he would always be talking shit. I can curse on this, right?
Yeah, totally. Okay.
Yeah. He'd always be saying something, couldn't keep his big mouth shut. And then when I was like 19, I just started talking to him. I ended up making a film about him, actually. It was my mom's idea to make a documentary about him because I used to really want to be a filmmaker. And we made that film and became really close. And then a couple years later, I started working at this carpentry shop making film sets. And I kind of thought that would be like an entry point to, filmmaking. I ended up working with a lot of people who were getting out of prison.
Oh, in the shop? At
the shop, yeah. So my community of formerly incarcerated folks was expanding a little bit. And then when I moved to LA, when I was 22, I think, I got into activism and studying history, not in that order, the opposite. So I enrolled in this class called 20th Century Genocide at a community college. I hadn't really gone to college. I did like a short year film school thing, but I was very adamant to not do college, but eventually decided to, after like working in film, not feeling really intellectually stimulated, wanting to expand my, world understanding. So I enrolled in this class, and it really fascinated me. I was instantly drawn into studying history. And I don't know, maybe being, 3 generations removed, 2 actually from the Holocaust had something to do with that. And then at that same time, Occupy Wall Street started. So that's how I then got into activism. And this is a really long answer to your question, but basically I came back to New York eventually, and I read this book called The New Jim Crow, and then had like a light bulb moment where I thought, okay, I don't quite know what area of activism I really want to dial in on, but that book really like dialed in my focus, and I felt comfortable with formerly incarcerated people enough. I didn't know people inside, but people out here, I was like, okay, yeah, this is kind of like what I grew up around a bit, So I started it hesitantly, and then little by little, here we are now.
And so did you just ask, well, some of them must have been musicians or were, right?
The people that I happen to know were not musicians. I don't think they'd even fancy themselves spoken word people or rappers, but I just started talking to everybody that I could find. Like I once stood outside Ready, Willing, and Able for 2 hours and just started talking to anyone who walked out because they wouldn't let me in the building. Stuff like that, like kind of totally non-strategic shit. And in the beginning, too, it was funny because I'd be like, oh, and they have to be black. Because originally the idea was to just do an album with black artists because that's what the New Jim Crow was really about. It was about how mass incarceration is a modern day racial caste system. So I thought, yeah, all the people I'd known were black or Puerto Rican. And it was like, I felt comfortable, funny enough, being this white guy who'd never been incarcerated. I was like, it's too good an idea to not try it. No matter how kind of like cringy it might be for me to be the one to do it. But then as I started to eventually reach out to people on the inside, it became really clear to me that I was stuck with it because people were saying like, you need to do this. You have this idea. It's really specific. And they actually kind of liked me. I was starting to get into pen pal relationships and stuff like that.
And so how many albums have you done? What songs, or how many different artists have you been working with?
A lot. I mean, I've recorded over 60 people inside, including a choir, so that ups the numbers a lot. But a couple choirs. But we've released 3 or 4 LPs, like over 20 singles, or just about 20 singles, 4 or 5 EPs. Have a lot of stuff in the works too. A couple LPs we're putting out next year, at least 2. A lot of stuff. Worked with like 12 to 24 formerly incarcerated folks, all people from all over the country. The prisons we've recorded in were in Ohio, Colorado, Mississippi, and a state that we got banned in. So I'm not going to disclose it.
So you get permission to go in and record?
Yeah.
And they're okay with it?
Yeah.
And it's a nonprofit, the label?
It is, yeah.
That's great. And so it just any funds go to kind of keeping it going, or?
Yeah. It's a tight ship.
Okay, so then all of that led to you wanting to do your own EP.
Yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to do my own music. I think I took a extremely roundabout way of doing it, but no regrets at all. I don't feel like shy about saying like, yeah, I also want to be a rock star, who doesn't? I felt like when I was 23 and got the idea for what's now Freer, I didn't have a lot of music experience. I was just learning to play the guitar and write some poetry. And I wanted to just dive in. So I think starting a record label, at the time, just this one album, which was always supposed to be like long and epic and blah, 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 kind of like Pink Floyd The Wall, was like a really headfirst way to do that, to just fully immerse yourself in it. I was listening to this interview with LL Cool J the other day. He has a new album out, and he was saying how you can't really be like a part-time musician or MC. Like, it just doesn't exist.
And so you dove in.
Totally dove in, yeah. And the whole time I've been writing songs and playing guitar and stuff like that, but I never really made enough money to pay technicians and bandmates and things like that. And I like to pay people at least a little something. So once I started getting a salary from Freer, then I started putting out my own music. It's kind of a direct line.
How would you say, like, growing up here and your experience has influenced the work that you're doing?
I think it's a really good thing for the work that I do, for both the prison stuff and my solo music. For the prison stuff, I mean, like I was saying, with Alex Pridgeon, my former mentor and friend, he was a guy who'd done time, and he wasn't necessarily uncommon. I mean, it was just something that was around you. Like, Lower East Side wasn't really that violent when I was growing up. I never felt very physically unsafe, but it was rough around the edges. There were a lot of drugs here. In '82, the New York Times ran a piece calling LES the drug capital of, I think, the world, definitely of America. And so I was like born in the residue of that. I'm not like I'm a white person. I'm Jewish, so, it's a little different, I guess. But I present as white, and that's what matters. But I'm not like some guy from New Hampshire, So I definitely come from a background that's a little bit street, and that helps me connect with a lot of folks I work with. Not everyone, because there's folks from the sticks who are incarcerated. But I'm not like just some country bumpkin. And, it's funny because I think like when you go to prison, it's actually a lot like a city. So I think that for like country bumpkin types who, let's say, get caught up in the system, they sort of even are forced into this like city environment, because prisons are like petri dishes. They're all contained, and you're just around a lot of people. It's like everyone's on top of each other, just like a city environment. So yeah, it makes me a little more just like quick on my feet and hip to the bullshit and that kind of thing. I've also had to learn some hard lessons along the way, but, because the Lower East Side, let's be clear, is not like the hood of Birmingham. It is not Philly. It is not Jackson, Mississippi. This is a little different.
Sure. I mean, there's a bigger mix of, I would think, all different types of people in some sense, right, in Manhattan, still part of Manhattan.
And I want to also answer the other part of your question of like how it relates to, how it informs my solo music, is that I think I'm sort of starting to discover that slowly, because I only just started putting out music, but I'm actually right now working on a project Might be a mixtape, might be an album, I'm not sure. But it's called Escape from LES. And it's gotten me thinking a lot, actually, about my relationship to the neighborhood, which I think is a good thing, because I hate the term unpack, but it is like a lot to unpack because I have such a history with it and I'm in it, and sometimes I feel kind of stuck in it. It can kind of feel like golden handcuffs, though, because I'm really lucky. Like I pay rent to my mom, and my rent is pretty affordable. But it's also like I've lived in this area over 70% of my life. My grandma grew up a few blocks away from where I grew up. Mm-hmm. Now she's back in a nursing home a few blocks away from us. And being that rents are what they are in the city, am I ever gonna get out of it? I don't know, but like one of the lyrics in the title track, actually, Escape from LES, is I want to see the world. I want to leave the nest, see the east side of a wider land. And I definitely feel that way. And I think it's okay to be like, living in a city is hard, and walking out of my door every day and seeing someone who looks like they may be dead is not light. It's not like, I'm not going to say that I'm in the trenches, but it's not light. And I see it all the time, especially since COVID.
Yeah. It's gotten rougher, it feels like.
Also, too, like the neighborhood is, it sounds like a broken record, but it's just so gentrified, and it's like there's so much money here. It's crazy. It's a lot to wrap your head around. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's probably like, I don't know, at least one millionaire on my block. When I was growing up, it wasn't like that. Yeah. There's probably a lot of millionaires in the neighborhood, and probably a few billionaires. Mm-hmm. And that's just crazy, considering how much there are strung out people.
Yeah, you can see the class divide sort of growing right in front of us.
Yeah.
It feels like.
It's kind of intense, yeah.
Yeah. What have you learned, would you say? And it's men and women who've been incarcerated.
Yeah.
Or are, one or the other.
Yep.
What would you say you've learned from them about their experiences, and when they want to share their experience, like through lyrics and songs or music?
There's definitely overlap. I think there's a lot of yearning, certainly from being inside, from being locked away. It's hard not to sing about that because it's what's in front of you. The genres are all over the place. We're pretty genre agnostic. I think I've recorded a lot of people inside, and I'd say everything I've recorded has been really from the heart, very earnest. We try to really stick with talented folks. We don't want, it's not a charity. Like, we're not just coming in to record people like trying to rap or something. But regardless of if someone's talented or not, I feel like everything I've ever recorded has been very earnest and from the heart, and someone just burning to share something. That's the main commonality. But you'd be surprised. I mean, people in prison are just like me and you in a lot of ways, and they're people, and all people have a lot of similar wants and needs day to day.
And you were the first, and are you still the only company that's organization that's doing this?
In America, I actually think we are, which is crazy. I think it kind of just goes to show how hard it is to get access. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily think it's because like we're so amazing. I mean, we are that too, but no, it's just really hard to get access. And I was just so fucking stubborn when I was younger about that.
You just persisted.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad that you were able to grow up here and were informed by everything in the neighborhood. And I hope you can escape it. Also.
Thanks, Traven.